So today we're going to look at the example where you have two equations and two unknowns. Last time we did this by substitution or by graphing or elimination, and this time we're going to look at it in terms of its matrices and what we can do to solve those. We have three different choices on what we can do with that. We can move an equation or two, we can change one of them at a time, or we can combine either of those equations. So those are our three things that we're looking at to try and solve this. So what we're going to do first is we're going to turn it into a augmented matrix, which means that we take all of the equations from here, all the coefficients, and we put them in the matrix here. And the second equation, we just put the coefficients, we leave the variables out of it. This would be the x column, this would be the y column, and then over here we put what they're equal to. You'll notice this nice little dotted line here, that's just to separate the variable section from the equal to section. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and we want to make a matrix that's the identity matrix for a 2 by 2. We want that matrix to show up here in our equation. So we've got to work on getting it that way. So it's already got the lead one that we need, so we're not going to change that any. But we do need to change this 2 to a 0. So since we're not going to change the 1, we're going to multiply the negative 2 times row 1. We're going to add it to row 2. We're going to put it back in row 2. So then that becomes, since I'm just going to rewrite that so it doesn't change. So I'm going to take negative 2 times 1, which is negative 2, plus 2, which is 0, and put that 0 back in row 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that again. So I'm going to take the 3 times the negative 2 and get negative 6, which I'm going to add to the negative 5 and make that negative 11. One more time, I'm going to take 11 times negative 2. I'm going to add that to negative 22 and put that back in row 2 as a negative 44. Okay, so once you get that done, then you've got your 1 and your 0 here. The next thing you need to do is to try and make that into a 1. So I'm going to take a negative 11 and I'm going to divide row 2 by a negative 11 and put it back in row 2. Well, 0 divided by anything is 0, so that doesn't change. Negative 11 divided by negative 11 is 1, and negative 44 divided by a negative 11 is 4. So that's how that gets changed into a 1 right here. So now we've got at least this much done. The next thing we need to do is we need to turn this 3 into a 0. So anything that I would do here, I'm going to look at my choices. I need to, if I divide that by, I don't know, how am I going to get that? If I divide that by 3, then this has got to be divided by 3, and I don't want to change that. So I'm going to end up using the combined method. So I'm going to take row 2 times negative 3. I'm going to add it to row 1. I'm going to put it back in row 1. So that means that I would have 0 times negative 3, which would be 0, plus 1, which is 0. I'm going to take 1 times negative 3, which would be negative 3, add it to 3, and put it back in row 1 as 0. I'm going to take 12, because that's negative 3 times 4, add it to row 1, which was 11, and put it in there and get negative 1. So when we get finished, then we have our solution. X is equal to negative 1, because it says here in the x column that x is equal to negative 1, and then you have y is equal to 4, because you have here the y column says that y is equal to 4, and that's the way you'd solve it.